Viewer contributions make local programming possible on WNIN. Become a member of WNIN with your contribution so we can continue to make this programming available. Visit WNIN.org and click on the donate button.
It's the Friday Wrap on WNIN FM. I'm John Gibson. Good to have you along on this Friday. Well, Indiana Lieutenant Governor Micah Beckwith conducted a town hall in Newburgh Wednesday night. It turned into a raucous event that was cut short after attendees shouted at Beckwith and a Warwick County Sheriff's deputy tackled and arrested a woman who had been ordered to leave. Sarah Lesh of the Evansville Courier and Press covered the meeting, and she joins me now. Sarah, as always, welcome to Friday Wrap.
Thank you for having me.
Good to have you here. Well, let's talk a little bit about how this meeting began and how it went, at least early on.
Yeah, so from the beginning, it was a pretty back and forth, kind of contentious. A lot of responses from the crowd to things that Beckwith would say. And if anyone has kind of followed the town halls that Lieutenant Governor Beckwith has been doing, he does not shy away from the back and forth with constituents. He has his opinions and he says them, and that back and forth with individuals is pretty normal from the way town halls have gone previously. He's had a few comments of his go viral from previous town halls. If anyone followed the comments he made about immigrants' rights to due process, saying that they essentially did not have them. That was from a Terre Haute town hall that happened, and that kind of got some national attention. So going into the evening, I think people had some of that in their mind, that they knew that there would be some back and forth, and there was a lot of it really from the very beginning.
When you say back and forth, as I understand it, folks were like in a line coming up somewhat orderly, right, to ask questions.
Yes.
But there was apparently, as you say, some back and forth perhaps from people who weren't at the microphone.
Yeah, so to be honest, it was both. There was we're set up in the Ohio Township Trustee's office. It's a massive kind of conference banquet room that they have over there. And so there's a bunch of chairs, seating. Anyone who wanted to ask a question was to get in line at the mic. Christy Risk was holding the mic, having people answer questions. She's a member of Beckwith's team. She had everyone in line, and the first person came up to the mic. The very first person who spoke had more of a comment than a question, which they were allowing. And so there was her first kind of talking directly to Beckwith, giving him some of her comments, and then when people in the crowd had a feeling or a call and response sort of thing, I mean, there was booing, there was shouting, there was some back and forth between members of the crowds themselves. So, of course, it was a fairly divided event. There were a lot of people there who were essentially in a Beckwith-style camp, over on one side they were there because they support the lieutenant governor and they like the way things are going, and then there was a large faction as well that was there for the very opposite reason, that they do not like him, they do not like what's happening. So there was some shouting amongst members of the crowd back and forth to each other as well.
I see. So how did it go? About how many folks were shouting? Was it pretty hard to put a number on?
I would say it's pretty hard to put a number on, because you had people shouting back and forth, but you also had people, of course, who just had opinions that they were voicing just to the people in their own group. So there was a lot of talking, there was a lot of shouting across the room, and there was a lot of curse words and things like that I don't totally know that I see a lot at town halls or public meetings. Those are typically squashed by organizers when those things start to happen. But in this case, there was some warning specifically to the woman who was later arrested. There had been They essentially gave her a 3 strikes policy. They went through and they said 3 times, next one you're out and that sort of thing. And so it was allowed to kind of get, contentious. There was nothing stopping people really from shouting or saying how they felt when it wasn't their turn. So.
But as you say, obviously it got to a point where we had an arrest.
Yes.
What happened then?
So this woman, as I mentioned, she was not in line. She did not at any point go to the mic to ask a question. But she was in the second or third row, so she was very close to the lieutenant governor, as far as being able to tell she's speaking directly to him.
Right.
So they're going back and forth. He's responding to her, and they're having some words back and forth. And she eventually, they say that they're going to have her removed. She says that she's going to leave on her own, that she's getting up, she's leaving. She says some words that I don't think I'm allowed to say on WNIN,
true.
I won't. But
I understand it, yes.
She says some things to the lieutenant governor. She says just some comments as she's walking out. But she was leaving. There was no one escorting her out. The sheriff's deputies that were there were kind of off to the side, walking behind, kind of making sure that she left, but they were not escorting her out.
Right. Well, but eventually, as you say, this woman was arrested. This happened out in the lobby, is that right?
So, no, it was still fully in the room. Okay. So there is a large lobby that it eventually sort of continued into. But the initial tackle and handcuffing was just amongst the crowd of people that was there, which led to a lot of people gathering around, filming, those sorts of things that happen when these things happen in a public place. Right. But she was almost to the exit door into the lobby, and that is when things sort of hit the complete breaking point of her being tackled and being placed in handcuffs.
Yes, indeed. This is the Friday Wrap on WNIN FM. We're speaking with Sarah Lesh of the Evansville Courier and Press. You can see her coverage of this story and other stories at courierpress.com. So in the end, who was the woman who was arrested? I believe we have a name.
Yes. So Amanda Bennett was the woman arrested. She has bonded out of jail at this point. She was arrested in Warwick County, so that's where any current or further proceedings will occur. And she has a few charges against her, including a felony charge, which is the battery against a public safety officer. There are allegations currently from law enforcement, the lieutenant governor himself, that there was a physical altercation where the woman touch the deputy. Essentially, they are saying that she shoved the deputy prior to being tackled. From my perspective of being there, I was not in a position to be able to see what occurred before the tackle. I was on the opposite side of the room trying to make my way through the crowd over there. Right. And from all video that we have reviewed at this point, both that we took there, myself and McKay Brown, our photographer, was there as well. Right. And from things that have been sent to us, things that have been posted online, we have not been able to see that there was anything that occurred prior. The Warwick County Sheriff's Office has told other media outlets that there is surveillance footage from within the building. And then, of course, we assume that there will be body camera. But there has also been statements from the Warwick County Sheriff's Office that the deputies were off duty at the time working this event. Right. And so we have not been given any sort of video from the Sheriff's Office directly that shows what they are saying occurred prior to this arrest.
But as you say, your photographer, McCabe, did not witness any shoving or...
He did not see anything. He was on that side of the room. If you go through, we tried to put all the photos that kind of show the tackle in succession. There is not a lot of visible... She's turned around to the deputy prior, and it looks like, they're maybe having words or something. And we just cannot tell. And until there's, we have been very clear in our reporting that we have no way to say yes or no in any way, which has caused some things from the lieutenant governor himself, who has had some thoughts on our coverage, and has had some words for those of us that were there, and just essentially that he's been on radio in Indy, and he talked to a person in Bloomington from public radio up there, saying that, I think he said it was a slap, a shove, so multiple different it actually was as well.
Gotcha. Well, now, as I understand it, another person does face a charge, and was there another arrest as well?
So there were 2 arrests that evening. So Amanda Bennett was arrested, and then Matthew Ike, I believe is how you say his last name, he was also arrested at the event. There is a third woman, Kelly Moore, who is actually running for House District 64.
As a Democrat.
Yes, and she was there. She had spoken to the lieutenant governor. She was one of the ones in line to ask a question. She was not arrested at the event. She was never placed into custody. She was never cuffed. But within the affidavit that was released with the arrest of Amanda and Matthew, the deputy asked for her to be charged for there was some altercation in which he says that she touches him as well. She has denied that. The Courier and Press called her. We spoke to her. We actually informed her of this allegation that was in the affidavit against her. She says she has full video herself of her. From her perspective, she's holding her phone while she's interacting with this deputy. We reviewed that online as well. Again, these things are never perfect, even with the video surveillance, because of angles where people are and everything like that. And so it's still hard to tell. What she has now at this point is an allegation against her within an official affidavit, a sworn affidavit from the deputy. And so she has no charges against her. I checked right before coming on here, too, to make sure that nothing had changed. So nothing has been filed against her at this point. And again, she denies that she ever touched the deputy in any way.
You mentioned all the video, and that, of course, is such a change that some of us have seen over the years. I mean, now there are, cameras everywhere. You mentioned possible surveillance cameras that we haven't even seen yet regarding this incident. Well, you mentioned the Lieutenant Governor himself, Lieutenant Governor Beckwith. After the town hall, he described it various ways. As you mentioned, he questioned your account of the story, right?
Yeah. So he did. He took to social media. He posted on Facebook. He posted on X. From 2 accounts, he has an official Lieutenant Governor account, and then an official, just his account, his personal account. And so he's posted there. He's, like I said, he's gone on Indianapolis radio stations, and he was in Bloomington the next day for an event in which he talked about this with a member of public radio up there. But one of the things from our end is that we've reached out to his media team specifically about the events of that evening. And then I have reached out to his communications director for a follow-up story that was solely topic related from the town hall, not related to any of the arrests or any of that chaoticness that occurred. And we have not heard back on either attempt. And so the Lieutenant Governor does seem to have issues with the reporting, but we have not been asked for any corrections. We have not been told, anything that is specifically wrong or asked for anything to be changed or retracted. And we also have not received any communication back from his media team when we have reached out in an attempt to have his side in it. And we have quoted all of the things from his social media and what we can take as public statements. But at this point, there's not a lot that we can do if he has an issue with it, as far as not being asked to make any specific corrections.
This is the Friday Wrap on WNIN FM. I'm John Gibson. Our guest today is Sarah Lesh of the Evansville Courier and Press. She covered that contentious town hall meeting this week in Newburgh, conducted by Indiana Lieutenant Governor Micah Beckwith. Well, Sarah, we talked, about maybe a little substance that happened before the chaos. I believe Center Point bills were one of the issues that was brought up before the meeting was cut short.
Yeah, so there were two people who were able to get to the mic to ask some questions about Centerpoint. One was focused more on the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission, so the ones who are okaying these bill hikes potentially from Centerpoint, that there's not a lot of representation or any representation from this part of the state. So all of the IURC members live in areas that don't have Centerpoint, so they're represented by other utility companies. And then the second question was more just focused on the fact that bills are high. What can we expect from Republicans at the State House who have a supermajority and have been saying for years and years, you know, that they want affordability. But the question was essentially, why should we trust Beckwith to handle that when his party has been in control for so long and nothing has changed? And how did Beckwith respond to those questions? He agreed in some points. He thinks bills are too high. He thinks things should be more affordable for individuals. He also said that he doesn't think Republicans have done a great job at making things affordable. But then he also sort of switched into a focus on Democrats, that they aren't winning elections to get into the State House. And so if they were more competitive, maybe the Democrats in the room at the town hall, maybe, you know, ask them to run, ask them to be more competitive, in which point he blamed the lack of competitiveness on Democrats' focus on social issues, bringing in trans people into the conversation about utility bills, which did not go well with the crowd that was there. A lot of shouts for him to stay on task, and, you know, we're talking about utilities here versus you know, the social issues that he then brought up in a way. And at that point, it is a really good example of the way he runs the town halls, with talking back and forth to the crowd, because, you know, he was saying that he was trying to offer solutions and they're shouting at him and, you know, that sort of thing. So it was, I think we talked to a couple people afterward who, you know, were disappointed that the town hall was cut short, because they felt there were more questions about Centerpoint that were kind of waiting. In line, there were correct? A lot more people in line. And there was no rule that if you weren't in line at the start, you couldn't stand up and get in line. So we don't know also how many people would have been prompted to have a question later if they had had the chance. Well, where does this all go? I guess, as we mentioned earlier, you alluded to it at least. These folks who were arrested have bonded out of jail, and I guess we're awaiting court hearings and more about the investigation, right? Yeah, so at this point, the people who were officially arrested will have court hearings that they'll have to attend. They're facing pretty serious charges from it. And as far as for the investigation itself, we really have not heard a lot from the sheriff's office on the actual incident, except that they are still investigating. And so this was, I mean, it turned into a pretty large thing. We had about 4 different departments on scene by the end of it, including the Warwick County called in EPD to come across the county line to help. And so there's a lot of witnesses too when you have something happen in the public and this large of a thing. Right. They were taking witness statements from people that evening. They were taking people's names to try and get video later on. So I would say that, you know, the investigation's still very much ongoing, but the 2 that were arrested that evening are already needing to prep and get ready for a potential first hearing. So I think there will be a lot to follow, including, you know, the fact that there's one woman who is kind of waiting to see if she's going to get charged with anything, which is, I imagine, a pretty heavy thing to be waiting to see. So there's a lot to follow, and I think that too, with the Lieutenant Governor's office, I think keeping an eye on future town halls if this impacts any of the way that those are run. Yeah, exactly. That is Sarah Lesh of the Evansville Courier and Press. You can see her stories on this event and other stories as well at courierpress.com. Sarah, as always, thank you for your reporting, and thank you for joining us on the Friday Wrap. Thank you for having me. Good to have you here. It's the Friday Wrap on WNIN FM. I'm John Gibson. Glad you can join us on this Friday. Well, this week, officials from both sides of the Ohio River met in Evansville for an update on the I-69 Ohio River Bridge project. I dropped by the event and filed this report. I-69 ORX spokeswoman Mindy Peterson summed up progress on Phase 1
on the Kentucky side.
On track to finish on schedule, on budget by late this year. That's what you want from a project like this.
Kentucky Transportation Commissioner Jim Gray told the gathering that when he took the job 5 years ago, Governor Beshear said he had 3 main projects.
I won't tell you all about the other 2, but at the top of the list was the I-69 ORX. And
on the Indiana side, Peterson says construction crews have erected more than 50 giant beams for ramps to the bridge.
Each beam, a single beam, weighs 100 tons. And they are bringing them in by one large specialized truck, one beam.
Peterson says crews have the beam deliveries down to a science. Plans call for the nearly $1.4 billion toll bridge to open in 2031. EREP Executive Director and former Evansville Mayor Lloyd Winnicky told WNIN News he's heard lots of questions about the existing twin bridges, but
we're not really worried about that right now. We are focused in a hyper way about getting the Ohio River, the new bridge, under construction and really make sure it maintains the timeline that we have.
Tentative plans have called for demolishing one of the twin bridges and saving the other for local traffic. For WNIN News, I'm John Gibson. Also this week, the Board of Zoning Appeals narrowly rejected a proposed solar farm in northern Vanderburgh County. Here's the story from last night. After hours of discussion, board members voted Thursday night at the Civic Center.
I show 3 yes, 4 no's, and the motion is denied.
Opponents of the large-scale energy generating facility cheered the vote. Bluegrass Creek Solar proposed the solar farm north of Baseline Road between I-69 and Old State Road. The plan included annual payments of $2,500 to more than 100 nearby residents. But many residents opposed the plan, and Vanderburgh County Commission President Justin Elpers recently expressed his opposition. Supporters say the solar farm is needed to move from fossil fuels to cleaner energy sources. For WNIN News, I'm John Gibson. It's the Friday Wrap on WNIN FM. I'm John Gibson. Good to have you along on this Friday. Well, this week, a feature story on ESPN.com about the film A League of Their Own. Madonna and Evansville has been making the rounds on social media. It's been nearly 35 years since Evansville served as the backdrop for much of the film's production. The author of that story is Harry Lyles Jr. He's a regular contributor to ESPN.com and is not shying in sharing the affection for the city that he calls his second home.
Well, hey, your story here locally has been making the rounds on social media and in the newspaper and on Facebook. So it's become a popular piece in the last 3 or 4 days here in Evansville.
Yeah, it's it's funny. One of the things that John was asking me is, hey, like, why'd you decide to tell this story? And I was just like, well, I mean, this is something I've always known about. I just didn't really have the platform. And when our season ended last year collegially, I usually go to my editor because I still do writing for ESPN.com, clearly. And, it's usually like, hey, like, what are the stories we're going to work on this off season? And most of them, they're almost always college football. And so I had my typical list. And then I was, one day I think I might've been at the gym, and I texted my editor and I said, hey, like, let me call you tomorrow. I've got something that you're not going to believe, and that this is a phone call story. This is not I'm going to text you about this, like, so let's chat it out. And, I explained it to him, sent him the image of the protest, and it was like, okay, wow, like, this is absurd. Right. And so they were on board, and, obviously here we are.
Yeah, that was my first question for you is how did the pitch go? What was the reaction to it? And were you surprised by how receptive they were?
I was not surprised by how receptive they were. So my editor, Chris Almeida, he used to work at The Ringer. He writes fantastic pieces himself. Like, he is a very good editor, very good journalist. And so I knew when I pitched it to him, I was like, I'm not going to have any problem with you. Like, I knew he was going to be on board, and he had a really good time working on this with me and deserves a lot of credit as well. And so I knew he was going to be on board. And honestly, like as it went up the chain, I got no pushback. Like this was like, yes, like this is an incredible story. A story that I would say one of my bosses, Ryan Cantor O'Mealy, he understands that, I should say he understands my Evansville connection and how, thorough, I guess, like my knowledge of just random Evansville things are. Given that, it is my second home. And so he was like, yes, like you are the guy to tell this story. Do it. Let us know how it goes, so.
Well, I was going to ask you about that, your Evansville connection. I know you make a lot of references and shout outs to Evansville and the Purple Aces on your appearances on Around the Horn and other ESPN shows. You've tweeted and posted on Instagram things about Una Pizza and the Purple Aces. What is your Evansville connection and your relationship with the city for those who don't know?
I had Una Pizza twice this weekend when I was in town. Steve's, by the way. Steve's is my first choice. That's Una 2, and then I would say Covert. Okay. If we're ranking them. I haven't been to the new one across from Mo's house. Shout out Mo. My connection, so I guess if we're going way back,
okay,
my great grandfather is Joshua Lyles, who founded Lyles Station next to Princeton.
Yeah.
My grandfather was Carl Lyles Sr., longtime EVSC board member, started off at Lincoln High School, all black Lincoln High School. Went to Wrights, was, I believe, assistant principal at Central for a time. I mean, when I go see my aunt and uncle, my aunt, she was a counselor at North High School. A lot of people still know the name Edith Lyles. Okay. She's one of my favorite people on the planet. My dad went to Wrights. He graduated from USI, worked in local radio, started off in Evansville, and obviously did very well for himself nationally. He's in the Black Radio Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
I still hear to this day, like if I do talk about Evansville on Around the Horn, or they see I've got a helmet back here, Evansville Aces football helmet that I bought years ago. That'll pop up on College Football Live. You'll see it on Friday.
Okay.
I'll have people reach out to me. I have a Facebook account that I don't use, but like I needed in this case to reach out to people to find for this particular story. That'll be like, hey, are you related to, my grandfather? And then they'll ask me about Emmett Lyles as well, who taught at Dexter for many years. So if there is an educator from Evansville with a last name Lyles or a farmer, I am probably related to them. So that's sort of my tie. We always went to Evansville around Christmas time growing up, I would say, as well as, some Father's Day weekends as well. And then as I got older, I would just make my own trips up, visit my aunt and uncle, as well as a couple of cousins of mine. And it is a place that I would say, I always tell people, I'm born and raised in Atlanta, but I did a lot of growing in Evansville. Like a lot of what has shaped me as an adult was in Evansville. So I mean, it's always comforting for me, whether I'm driving up or I mostly fly up now. But when I get there, I don't feel like I've traveled. I just feel like I've come home. And that's usually friends and family that are from there. It's never, hey, when are you coming back to Evansville? When are you visiting? It's when are you coming home? So it is very much a second home for me.
Well, that's quite the resume then of all the friends and family that you have here, going back a lot of generations. One thing that I noticed in your story, you mentioned Don Mattingly, Bob Greasy, Lily King, Bossy Field, obviously A League of Their Own, the West Side Nut Club Fall Festival. And I feel like as somebody who I'm not a local in terms of being born and raised here, but I've lived here almost 20 years. When people ask me about Evansville, those are all the things I say as well. I'm like, do you know who Don Mattingly is, or Bob Greasy, or Lily King? Or have you heard of this, or you heard of that? What is it about this town and its stars and its athletes and the famous people who come from here that people like to talk about?
I think it's interesting because, I describe Evansville as, one of America's biggest small towns,
Sure.
right? Um, I have always just been intrigued, even from a young age. And this is something that I think has helped me in my writing career specifically, is I always sort of felt that sense of pride. And I think Evansville has, in many ways, always been a place that, I think, and it's not for me to say, right? Because I was not born in Evansville. I'm not from there. I did not grow up the majority of my life there. But given the time, which is a lot of time spent there, I have always just sort of gathered that, like people from Evansville are obviously, as I mentioned in the story, a proud people. They are perfectly fine if they never leave. Some, not all. I'm not going to speak for everybody.
Sure.
But the ones that do get out and do something in the world, it almost to me has always seemed like people take that as you are representing us, so we can stay here and enjoy the life that we have. And I have always sort of felt that myself when I do television, and I've got, whether it's the sleeves back here or
Right.
that
Right.
that Evansville helmet or whatever the case may be. And that has always been very meaningful to me as well. Like the amount of messages that I get about just like, hey man, we appreciate how much you love us.
Mm-hmm.
Like that means something to me, because I also believe I would not be here without Evansville. Like one of the first features I ever wrote in my career, in fact, it is the first feature that I ever wrote in my career, was on the plane crash of 77. Like
Right.
my first day at SB Nation, I went to my bosses. I said, hey, almost a year down the line, it's going to be the 40th anniversary of this plane crash that, for whatever reason, does not have a wider notoriety nationally than it should.
Right.
So that's the first feature I told. It helped me establish a relationship with the university. Bob Pristash over there, I owe so much to Bob Pristash.
Mm-hmm.
That allowed me to develop a relationship with the university. So I'm on the bus with the UE basketball team in 2019, and I'm at Lexington. I'm the only national media person, really non-Kentucky
Yeah.
person, that was there for that game.
This is when Evansville's basketball team beat the number one ranked Kentucky.
Yes.
Wildcats. Yeah.
And that right there, that story, that changed my life, because that's one of the stories that ESPN called me and said, hey, how did you do that? Like, can you do that for us? And so there's that. And then, one of the first things I wrote at ESPN was about the sleeves and the lore of it, and,
Right.
Things like that. And so it's always just been something. And and to me, it's like very fitting for me, again, because of like how I do feel like I grew as a person, how much my family does mean to me, that Evansville has played such a part in my own career. And I will never personally be able to pay Evansville back. I actually do feel that way. And I also don't feel like Evansville, would ever say, hey, you owe us something. I
Sure.
don't. And I love that about it. And I love the pride that the people of that city hold. I think more people should be proud of where they're from, the way that the people of Evansville are proud of where they're from.
What has been the reaction over the last few days that you've received from people, obviously in Evansville, but from across the country who maybe have connections to the city or the university or their families from here when they've seen your story and your piece pop up on ESPN.com?
I would say mostly from people from Evansville. It's been, again, I've just gotten a lot of thank yous.
Sure.
Because I think at this point, like, people are pretty like familiar that, if there's something that needs to be said, like, at least in terms of, things as it pertains to Evansville, like, I'm going to say it or I'm going to tell it. Right. I would say nationally, a lot of people are just like, wow, okay, like, so like, this is like not BS. Like, this isn't a thing that actually happened. I'm like, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's interesting. I think the biggest thing, though, that has stood out among this entire thing has just been, even when I spoke with people locally, and I feel like I obviously got this message across in the story because it's one of the last lines of it, is that the image of the protest and the disdain or perceived disdain for Madonna and what she said is not how Evansville remembers that.
Right.
And so I thought it was I hope one of the things that people did take away from it was like, hey, I personally think it's okay if you had an issue with what she said. I felt like she was being tongue in cheek. I tried to talk to Kurt Loder
Hmm.
because I wanted to know, like, hey, man, can you recite to me how she said it? Because to me, that makes sort of a huge difference. When I read that,
Yeah.
because growing up, I was like, Prague's nice. Like my sister did an orchestra camp there or something like that. Like
Right.
it ain't a bad place.
Yeah.
So like I felt like, all right, she's being tongue in cheek. I don't really think she means anything by it. And clearly she did have a good time. Now that doesn't mean that she had a great experience with everybody there and vice versa, because that's not how anybody is,
Hmm.
right? I mean, I'm sure someone's met me and decided, hey, like Harry Lyles, God, he stinks to high heavens, and they might have caught me on a bad day, and I just wasn't as polite as they wanted me to be. And so I did want to sort of show, like, hey, like among all the people that I spoke with, I spoke to a lot of people off the record, like. There are things in this story that I found out that like blew my mind that did not make it, and I will keep until I die,
Okay.
that were very interesting, like very interesting.
Yeah.
I just, again, I always go into something like, hey, like this is the broad idea that I've got, and I felt like, again, I came away from this learning like, okay, this was not nearly as contentious, and a lot of people sort of, I don't want to say they had it out for Madonna, but I will also say in my research, which I guess I know I'm getting long-winded here, but I read every Courier and Press, and for the youngsters out there, like they were two separate papers at the time. I read every single article that mentioned her name in either paper from January 1st, 1991 until December 31st, 1992. Like it took me a long time to go through all of that and sift through it. Like my Google document for this story is like 50 pages or something like that, and that's just links. Um, but I took away again from this that just obviously she was basically the most famous person on the planet
Right.
at
Yes.
that time,
Yes.
like without question, right? I call her the Queen of Pop in the first section. She was known as the Material Girl at that point. Later the Queen of Pop, but just seeing how unfairly I would say people were towards her. And I say that because in my research, I read so many extra articles in which her name was mentioned that had absolutely nothing to do with her.
Mm.
And people would just drag her name through the mud and say just absurd things about her that obviously, no one's ever going to have to apologize for. But I thought that part of it was interesting. And I hope that that's something that people took away from it, which is that, hey, like a lot of the way that she was and is still talked about was misogynistic and sexist, and it's pretty nasty.
Mm. Yeah, definitely. Well, Harry, I really appreciate your time today talking about this story that came out just on Monday. I mean, I opened up my ESPN.com page that day for the first time just to check the news, and I see an illustrative collage of Madonna, Bossy Field, the Evansville skyline, and I'm like, wait a second. And I see this headline that reads, "How a League of Their Own Started a Feud Between Madonna and Evansville, Indiana." And I'm like, wait a second, I know this story, I think. But then I click on it, and so then I start sharing it around the office and talking to people. I'm like, did you guys see this story? And like, oh yeah, everyone's talking about it. And that was just a few days ago. So you've made quite the waves here, at least in the tri-state area. So congratulations on that.
No, I appreciate it, and thank you for having me anytime, really. I'm always interested in anything Evansville. So
Anything else Evansville related coming down the pike or on your to-do list in the next few weeks, months, or even years, stories that need to be told?
you know, it's funny you say that because I told my editor when we did this, I was like, hey, like I want this to be the last of the things that I know
Yeah.
of Evansville. This is the last one that has already happened that I can tell. I want the next one to be David Ragland and his story leading Evansville back into the NCAA tournament. Like that is one that I have even
Yeah.
like personal connection, like ties with.
Hmm.
So that I want that to be the next one. That is my hope.
How does Coach Ragland feel about that? Any pressure there?
No, whenever we talk about it, it's not an if, it's a when.
Right, right,
It's
right.
a when.
Yeah,
So
good. Well, that's great. That's awesome. Well, thanks again for talking with me today. It was a real treat. Nice to meet you. Thanks for being so generous with your time. And thanks for telling just such a great story about a really cool time in Evansville's history. I really appreciate that.
Absolutely, Kenton. Anytime, man.
That was WNIN's Kenton McDonald speaking with ESPN's Harry Lyles Jr. Lyles is also a regular on ESPN's College Game Day and a former panelist on Around the Horn. It's the Friday Wrap on WNIN FM. I'm John Gibson, and joining me now with the sports chat for this week is Jevin Redman. Jevin, good to see you.
Yeah, thanks, John.
Good to have you along, as always. Well, a busy sports time here in the Tri-State. Starting off with this, the high school football season, it kicks off for real tonight, right?
Yeah, tonight is week one throughout the state of Indiana, and the weather broke just in time a couple of days ago. Sometimes, this time of the year, week one, week two, have to worry about the heat, and sometimes games get pushed back for later kickoff, but won't worry about that. And week one should be a great night for football. And as we look at some of the matchups in the SIAC throughout the Evansville area, North is at Castle, Jasper plays at Memorial, Wright's at Harrison, Central at Mater Dei, and Boise is at Vincennes. And just some storylines for week one tonight. With those games I just mentioned, you have three coaches that are making their debut at their school. So at North, Zach Nero makes his head coaching debut. Derek Hart, who is the son of former Wright's head coach John Hart and also brother of Nick Hart, who's at Gibson Southern, makes his head coaching debut for Jasper. And then Mater Dei alum Cody Hess is the new head coach of the Wildcats, so he'll coach his first game tonight. So we'll see how they fare here in week one. And then, last year it was Memorial who won the SIAC. They went 9-0. They were the champs. Again, they host Jasper tonight. And one of the note, outside of the city, but Heritage Hills was the state champs in Class 3A last year. They get bumped up to 4A, and they open up their season home against South Spencer. So those are some of the headlines for week one tonight.
There you go, a busy night of high school football. Well, let's also talk about some college sports, because there are quite a few college sports happening right now, or at least some news, right? Yeah,
so at USI and UE, their fall season underway. All the soccer teams have had a few matches under their belt, and then next weekend is when volleyball starts for both USI and UE. But some news came out for basketball season a few days ago. Both schools on the men's side released their non-conference schedules, and at the University of Evansville, several highlights on their schedule this year. John, they'll open up at Purdue on November 4th. That is their very first game, and Purdue has a chance to be the number one team in college basketball, so a big test for the Purple Aces there.
Yes.
They'll head to the Virgin Islands the weekend before Thanksgiving on November 21st to 24th. They have a home game against Ball State December 3rd, and then they finish up non-conference with two exciting road games at Western Kentucky December 6th and at Notre Dame December 13th. So a very good non-conference schedule for Evansville. And over at USI, a few highlights for them. They'll open up at Butler November 5th. They'll head to Daytona, Florida, November 20th and 21st for the Boardwalk Battle. And they also play an in-state non-conference game at Indiana State December 7th. So while we're talking fall sports, basketball season will be here in a few months.
Before you know it, it will be here, in fact. And, of course, fall means the NFL. We're just about through the preseason now, right?
Yeah, so the NFL shortened their preseason a few years ago from 4 games to 3 games, and this weekend is week 3, and then it'll be on to the regular season. But tonight, the Tennessee Titans play at home against the Minnesota Vikings, the Chicago Bears, the Kansas City Chiefs. Then tomorrow, the Colts wrap up their preseason schedule at the Cincinnati Bengals at 12 noon. And, John, the big storyline this week was with the Colts as they named their starting quarterback for week 1. They're going with Daniel Jones. It was somewhat of a divisive decision among the fan base because that sends Anthony Richardson, who was their number 4 overall pick back in 2023, to the bench. And, Daniel Jones was a quarterback for the New York Giants for 6 years, made 69 starts for them, and had a record of 24, 44-1, and Colts fans, just kind of looking at some opinions online, they feel like Anthony Richardson, who's only had 15 starts in a short career, hasn't really been given enough of a chance, but he's been injured some. But Colts go with Daniel Jones and more of a win now type of mentality, and see how it plays out in a few weeks.
Yes, indeed. Time will tell. Well, of course, the baseball pennant races are still happening as we move closer to fall.
Yeah, just about a month left in the regular season for Major League Baseball, and the Chicago Cubs are in a good position to make the playoffs. They're still 7 games back of the Brewers for first place in the Central Division, but they have the top wild card spot right now, and they have a 6-game cushion for a playoff spot. So the Cubs, like I said, in a good position to make the playoffs. The Reds,
they managed to beat the Brewers a few games this week, right?
Yeah, they just had a long 5-game series because of a makeup game, and the Cubs won 3 of 5, so gained a little ground there on the Brewers.
Bit, yes.
And the Reds, Reds, they are 67 and 61. They've been playing better of late. And John, they're just a half game out of a playoff spot behind the Mets for that last wild card position. And the Cardinals, they're 64 and 65. They've hovered around 500, but still only 4 games out of a playoff spot with a month to go. And this weekend, the Cubs are out west at the Los Angeles Angels. The Reds are also in Arizona taking on the D-backs. The Cardinals in Tampa to take on the Rays. And finishing up our baseball chat for local baseball fans of the Otters, just a few more chances to see them in action. Right. Their season ends here in about a week and a half, but they have 9 games left on the schedule. They start their final 6-game homestand tonight against Windy City, and while they don't have a chance to make the playoffs, they have been playing better baseball of late. They've won 8 straight games, but they're still 35 and 52, but hey, at least they're playing better here at the end of the season.
There you go. You can check out the Otters. You can check out some high school football. Should be a nice night weather-wise for all of that. And, of course, the WNBA, we've got the Indiana Fever in action tonight, right?
Yeah, they have a tough game against the best team in the league, the Minnesota Lynx, who are 28 and 7. The Fever are 19 and 16. Right now, they have a 2-game cushion to make the playoffs. They're in 6th place. The top 8 teams make the postseason. But with 9 games left on the schedule, the Fever is trying to piece it together. They have been injury-prone this year.
Yes, indeed.
Hard to believe. They have 4 of their guards that have been injured for a significant amount of time, 3 of which have been ruled out for the season. Sophie Cunningham, Sydney Colson, and Harry McDonald. And the big one is Caitlin Clark. She's been sidelined for really over half the season. Still no timetable on her with a groin injury and also now a bone bruise on her left ankle. So if you kind of read the writing on the wall, probably tougher to come back this year. They're still holding out hope, but the Fever in a position to make the playoffs still with 9 games left.
Yes, indeed. That is Jevin Redman with a very busy sports chat this week. Jevin, as always, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, John.
It's the Friday Wrap on WNIN FM. I'm John Gibson. Good to have you along on this Friday. And it's time now for the Weekend Notebook. Quite a few things happening around the tri-state this weekend. Let's start with the Frog Follies. It's the 50th year for the Street Rod Show at the Vanderburg 4-H Center. The event features vintage hot rods from across North America. Admission is $10 for adults, and children under 12 are admitted free. The Frog Follies raises money for the Easter Seals Rehabilitation Center. Frog Follies continue through Sunday at the Vanderburg 4-H Center off Boonville, New Harmony Road. Moving to tomorrow, Saturday, the Franklin Street Bazaar is back in, continues as it does this time of year. This weekly event features growers, vendors, food trucks, free yoga, live music, and more. It's from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. on the grounds of EVPL West on West Franklin Street. Again, that's the Franklin Street Bazaar happening tomorrow, Saturday, from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Also happening this weekend, it's the Evansville Museum Geek Con. Organizers describe Geek Con as a day devoted to celebrating the arts, science, and history of geek culture. The event features panels and presentations, hands-on activities, board games, a vendor room, and a cosplay contest. GeekCon is Saturday from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. at the Evansville Museum. Admission is $9 for kids, $14 for adults, and free for museum members. Also happening on Saturday, it's the TP Park Market. It's the 3rd annual market in the park off South Garvin Avenue. You'll find live music, food trucks, merchants, local artists, and all kinds of family activities. The TP Park Market is Saturday from 4 to 8 p.m. in TP Park. Also happening, a busy weekend at the Arts Council here in downtown Evansville, starting with the Remix reception. Remix is an assignment-based art exhibit where artists create original visual works inspired by a specific song selected from a curated list. Each participating artist chooses a track from the list, spanning genres, eras, and cultural movements, and interprets it through visual art. The reception is Saturday from 5 to 6:30 p.m. at the Arts Council of Southwestern Indiana. That's at 212 Main Street here in downtown Evansville. The exhibit runs through September 20th. Also happening at the Arts Council Saturday night, it's an On the Roof concert. Dream Street, EO Kids, and Melanie A. Davis will perform on the Arts Council roof from 6:30 to 10 p.m. Saturday. The concert series is free and open to all ages. A cash bar is also available for those 21 and over. Again, that's an on-the-roof concert happening tomorrow night at the Arts Council here in downtown Evansville. Dream Street, EO Kids, and Melanie A. Davis will be performing. If you have an event that you'd like us to mention here on the Weekend Notebook, just send it my way via email at jgibson, that's the letter J, Gibson, at WNIN.org. We'll do our best to get your event on the Weekend Notebook. I'd like to thank all of our guests on today's Friday Wrap, including Sarah Lesh of the Evansville Courier and Press. A big thanks to WNIN's Kenton McDonald, also ESPN.com's Harry Lyles Jr. for chatting with us. A big thanks not to only for engineering today's show, but also bringing you the sports chat. That was Jevin Redman. Thanks to Jevin, as always. Also a big thanks to Mariah Winnie for social media support. A big thanks to Indiana Public Broadcasting Stations. And of course, a big thanks to listeners like you. It's your support that makes programs like the Friday Wrap and all of the programs you hear at WNIN possible. As you may know, now is the best time to make your contribution. Now more than ever, you can make that contribution at WNIN.org, and thanks when you do. This is 88.3 WNIN FM, Evansville, Henderson, and Owensboro. With your support, we're building a better tri-state together. Well, I hope you and yours have a great weekend. Take advantage of the milder weather. And I'm John Gibson. For this Friday, that's a wrap.